Accurate, diverse stories in the media are critically important. SRC Partners is a full-service cultural production firm. From development to market, we provide expertise on diversity and inclusivity. You will reach a much wider audience when they feel heard.
Welcome to the Non-Obvious Beyond Diversity Summit. My name is Sandhya Jane Patel. I'm cultural producer and co-founder of SRC Partners. I'm delighted to welcome you to today's panel entitled Casting Calls, How to Create Accurate Representations for Underrepresented Communities. Before I introduce our esteemed moderator, I'd like to take a moment to reflect upon the history of these Indigenous lands we all call home. While we are meeting today on a virtual platform, all of us occupy spaces that carry the powerful legacy of these diverse peoples and their unique local cultures. Through this acknowledgement, we reaffirm our deep commitment to improving our understanding of America's shared heritage. And we recognize our collective responsibility to improve the bonds between all nations. We are grateful for the opportunity to meet you wherever you may be on your journey towards a more diverse, equitable, and inclusive society so that we can do the work together. And now to introduce our panel moderator. Zora DeHorter is a Nigerian-born, British-raised television and commercial casting director for Hollywood independent films. She's on the board of directors for the prestigious Casting Society of America as co-VP of Communications. Please welcome Zora DeHorter.
Thank you. Lovely introduction. I appreciate that. Really nice. Thank you so much. I'm so honored to be here. Thank you for having me here. I'm really excited to bring on our panelists. We could begin our discussions. And my first panelist is Charlene Polite-Cawley, who's the VP of Diverse Insights and Partnership for Nielsen. Charlene Polite-Cawley is responsible for thought leadership and strategic partnerships that advance the community's Nielsen's measures and demonstrates the imperative of a more inclusive media ecosystem. Hello, Charlene.
Hey, Zora, how are you?
Thank you for coming. Our next guest, our next panelist is Shireen Rasak, who's a writer, co-executive producer, and co-chair of TTIE. Shireen is a co-executive producer on NBC's New Amsterdam and a co-founder and a co-chair of the think tank for Inclusion and Equity, or TIE, a consortium of working TV writers dedicated to improving working conditions for TV writers, increasing inclusion in TV writers' rooms, and promoting authentic storytelling. Thank you, Shireen.
Hi, thanks for having me.
And our final panelist is Lydia Dean Pilcher, who's an executive producer and founder of Scene Mosaic. Lydia is an American film and television producer and director and founder of Scene Mosaic, a production company based in New York City. A two-time Emmy Award winner, Lydia has produced over 35 films, including those shown here. Most recently, she was the executive producer for A Suitable Boy and has a project based on the life of Nigerian musician and political activist Fela Kuti in development. Yay! She has been an active leader and vocal supporter of women and minorities in the industry, having co-founded and served as the chair of the PGA Women's Impact Network. She is also co-author of Miss Report, The Power of the Female-Driven Content, which provides creators with tools to successfully pitch female-driven content. What a fantastic panelist. Thank you, ladies. So let's get started. Let's start this amazing discussion we're going to have. Let's get right to Charlene. Charlene, can you please give us a quick review of recent Nielsen report on inclusion metrics for TV?
My pleasure. So Nielsen recently released our first inclusion analytics report. It was our opportunity to combine not just our ratings data, but also the metadata that we collect about the different genres of programming and the information we have about the celebrities that you see on screen. So with that, I think the first slide was showing what we found when we combine these new metrics about a share of screen for diverse populations on television. Overall, the story's pretty good. about 92% of the most popular content had some measure of diversity, whether that's women, people of color, or LGBTQ people. But these blue bars you see on the screen, women, for example, who make up about 52% of the population, only get 38% share of screen across all of television. And so those are some of the kinds of differentiations to parity that we can bring out in this analysis that helps show us that, yes, there's some presence of different definitions of diversity across popular programming, but presence alone is not representation. And even when we do have representation on screen, it's not just about the quantity, it's also about the quality and context that diverse identity groups appear in the content that we view. Diving into this data set, we were able to see that representation varied across television platforms. So for broadcast, cable, and streaming platforms, or what we call subscription VOD or SVOD. And further, as you see here, when I talk about those genres or the descriptors that appear in popular content, what really showed in our analysis was that there's some kind of narrow and recurring themes. When we do get a lot of representation in content, we tend to see some of the same themes showing up. So for Black women, for example, emotional, or we'd see content that focused on sons, family relationships, things like that. And so in the report that is free for you to download and access, along with a ton of data on our website, you can really explore some of these additional themes. One additional trend that we really saw, especially for diverse groups that were underrepresented, this SVOD and streaming platforms provided more representation when you started to look at the intersectionality. So here you can see on the screen, of course, overall, men and white men in particular have a ton of representation across content. When we start to look at other groups across cable, streaming, and broadcast, you can see that there is a wide variety of representation depending on the platform. And as we track, what audience members have access to in the home, we've definitely seen populations across Asian, Hispanic, Black households migrating to SVOD services in recent years. Part of that, we think, is because of the additional representation, the additional stories, the space to really expand those genres and themes that's appearing on this platform.
I have to say that is so interesting, and it goes into, not to make it all about me, but as a casting director, one of the things I struggle with, and I butt heads about sometimes, is not to have Shireen. She was so clear about. Sorry, I said the wrong name. I meant Charlene was clear in saying that even, for example, Black women, and seeing them as over emotional and stuff like that. As a casting director, sometimes an actor, a Black actor, will come into a room, and they may be told by the producer, "Can you make it more urban?" And which is, to me, is just like, oh no, please, no, don't say that. It's not okay. And hearing these things, or for example, when they have Latino and they're lumping all Latino X, the Latin X thing is coming up now. A Cuban is different from a Mexican. And then having all of them lumped together, or Asians, Chinese is very different from Thai or Korean. And so as a casting director, that frustration about trying to get producers and studios to be more open and being better about how they label and describe different ethnic groups. So that's amazing that you touch on that. So thank you, Charlene.
My pleasure.
Let's keep talking. This is fascinating. Lydia.
Yes.
Not to put you on the spot, but we're going to ask you now.
Okay.
Can you tell us, what these numbers look like anecdotally? What's anecdotally, from your experience, what do these numbers look like?
Well, I think Sandhya had shown a report that I had worked on, which is actually a bit outdated, but it was an important study to do at the time, because I would say it was about, less than a decade ago, we were really realizing that the needle hadn't moved in terms of representation of women on screen. And I, produce with a lot of female storytelling, a lot of female talent in front and behind the camera. And I really felt like the world must be getting better as well. But the data showed that it wasn't. And I think that the data and the work that groups like Nielsen does is really, really important, because we do tend to view the world that we create and we live in. And a lot of times, that is, then the lens is our own bias. And it's the bias that we bring to our world of storytelling. So I think that, I think that we've, really undergone a year of real, people use the term cultural reckoning all the time. And I think that it's been seismic in terms of really, it's, what I've realized is when I did all of that analysis of data with women, it wasn't just women, it was every sort of, I say, underrepresented group or undervalued group in mainstream media. And I think that there is an awareness now that translates to audience, which translates to money. And that's what, business owners and business people will respond to, right? It's the bottom line. So I found that sort of connection in terms of representation translates into audience to be a really important strategic way to convince people in Hollywood to diversify, not just what we see on camera, but the kind of stories that we're telling. And I just want to say one other thing, which is that I was thinking about it as we were coming on, because, a lot of times I speak to industry groups and I realize that the people attending this conference are in a whole wide range of mainstream groups. But I think that, I think in the world that we live in, we know that people love stories. And I think that everyone in their business uses narrative to tell stories. And even scientists use their data. They need people to create stories around the data so that people can understand it. So I think we all have a responsibility when we're telling stories to check our bias and to develop strategies to check our bias, because it's not going to happen naturally. It's like going to the gym. It's like a muscle. You have to do it constantly. If you drop it, you've lost it. So I think we all have to think that way, no matter what business we're in. What is our piece of world building? What is our piece of contributing to a world that really reflects, the beautiful, diverse, wide range of ideas and thoughts and people and cultures and religions, and that we all have that responsibility.
No, you're absolutely right, and I'm so glad you brought up the idea of bias, because I did a whole seminar through Casting Society of America. We're trying to be much more proactive as casting directors, and we actually did a whole seminar and a workshop on bias training. And it's crazy, even all ethnicities, we all have some hidden level of bias. Yeah. And it's crazy to try and break that down and discuss it openly. And how can we be better about being unbiased somehow? So that's great that you talked about it and you're dealing with that. Thank you. Mm-hmm. Shireen, now your turn. Let's get you in there to get your perspective. So you've been fighting for inclusion in the writers' room, which is fantastic. Can you tell us about your work with the TTIE and what impact you're hoping to have?
Well, the Think Tank for Inclusion and Equity started because, again, it's like what Lydia was talking about in terms of data. When I was coming up through the ranks, I had, a lot of my friends were from various underrepresented groups, and we were hearing a lot of the same stories. We were telling a lot of the same stories about what are the barriers to career advancement, what are we experiencing in the writer's room, the types of pushback we're experiencing in the writer's room. And a lot of people would say to us, well, that's just you. So what we started with Ty was to do a survey to find out what is the level of how pervasive all of this was. And what we found was very striking. And so we've put out a report 2 years in a row now. We're gearing up to do the third one called Behind the Scenes, the State of Inclusion and Equity in TV Writing. And it basically outlines all of these barriers, all of the biases kind of that people are facing. Pardon me, I have a cat. And we try and outline some of the solutions to moving forward and telling better stories. And so a big part of our work moving forward is to target authentic storytelling. And so kind of what Charlene was talking about, there's a difference between diversity and representation. I guess I say there's a difference between diversity and inclusion, because there's a difference between colorblind casting and color conscious casting. And so authentic storytelling is all about infusing characters with the background that they come from. It's kind of ridiculous to say that a character's race or gender or LGBTQIA plus status or their ability doesn't impact who they are. I mean, it's not true in reality. It shouldn't be true in storytelling either. So that led us to the fact sheet project that was just flashed up on the screen. And we put out 6 of these fact sheets, which is basically to start the conversation of what are the harmful tropes and stereotypes that Hollywood has been perpetuating, and what are some better stories that we can tell about all of these communities.
That's a very good point. Let me ask you, so while I still have you on talking about this, do you think there is a difficulty for BIPOC to get into the room, and they have to do all the work for everybody else, for every other BIPOC group? And how can we set boundaries and ask for others to be included, do you think?
I mean, it's an ongoing issue for sure, because I've definitely been in rooms where I've been the only person of color. I've luckily not been in a room yet where I've been the only woman, which it seems like it's trending away from that, which is fabulous. Thank God we're not on equal footing yet, though. But we are still in a bad situation, but not a great situation in terms of representation of all other underrepresented groups.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, there have been times when, I mean, I'm South Asian. I'm expected to know everything about Asia. And because I'm also from my dad's side of the family is Muslim, I'm expected to know everything about Muslims all over the world. I'm like, there's 2 billion of them. I don't know everything about every Muslim in the world. But it is hard. It is hard having to be the purveyor of that knowledge when it should be incumbent on every writer in the room to do some research, to reach out to people, to have friends in those communities. God forbid.
Good point. Yeah, it's hard. It's a constant uphill battle. So Lydia, let me ask you a question. Tell us about the fight for inclusivity in the industry over the past 20 odd years. I mean, including the ongoing fight for gender parity in front and behind the camera, and how to produce stories for BIPOC and underrepresented communities.
Mm-hmm. Well, listen, I think that one of the things that is really important for everybody to be paying attention, and I think that we are more aware of it than ever, especially from this last year and this election and the demographics of our country. And this is something that Charlene checked me on this, but I think it's this year, 2020, where more than half the nation's children are expected to be part of what has previously been called a minority group. By the year 2044, there's not going to be a minority in America. So the shifting demographics in terms of the minority majority, we're really in it, and we see how it's changing every sort of aspect and walk and dimension of life, and it's making us a more rich country. I mean, it's making us a better humanity, and learning about all of our worlds and all of our stories is part of what this inclusivity brings, and it's the richness that it brings. And I, again, just go back to audience, because I do think that there have been different things that data itself, has brought forward in the age of information, and that has really speeded along certain things. At the same time, it does take big institutions a bit of time to turn the ship around. And that's happening. And that's where we come in. And that's where we, help people with strategies. So, like even as you were talking, Zora, I was interested when you were talking about some of the things that come across your office when you're dealing with casting and somebody comes in and says, could they be more urban? You know, what's the language that you use to respond to that? How do you shift their thinking without making them feel threatened or that they, you know, that they're a bad person?
Well, to be honest with you, I'm okay making them feel like a bad person. It's not appropriate. It's not appropriate to ask someone, you know, just assume just based on their color of the skin that we all sound the same. I mean, as you know, I mean, as you can hear, I have a proper British accent. So I also get that, oh my God, you don't seem black. You know, that I get that even. And or saying a derogatory term in front of me and they go, oh, you seem different. I didn't think you'd get upset because you don't seem like that. So I constantly have to be. But I have to say, in fact, I want to bring Charlene into this conversation. I personally became more empowered as a woman, as a Black woman, for two things. First of all, the Me Too movement, and also the Black Lives Matter movement. I wasn't brought up here. So obviously my Black experience has been completely different, but I identify so much with it. And I understand, because for a while, I think I was so worried about being perceived as the angry Black woman. God forbid you step out of line.
Absolutely.
Yeah, to be honest with you, I'm okay being seen as that because I am an angry Black woman, and there's lots of reasons why I am an angry Black woman. And I now am more comfortable saying no, that is not okay. And I have to say, people have been pretty receptive to that. I feel like people are getting better about that. As I mentioned before, I'm on the Casting Society of America. I'm on the board of directors. I'm the only one of two Black people in an organization that's 75% white women. But I have to say they've been really open to dialogues about change and how we can be better. We have now, me and a few other people have been chair now on the BIPOC Alliance. We're doing mentorship programs and training and education for underrepresented people. Because how do you get into casting? You know, there's no way to learn. And it's unfortunately, not everybody has the luxury of working for free, which is how I learned. I got into casting by working for free for nearly a year. To show my worth, you know, because there's nowhere at school to learn that. So now we're trying to do mentorship programs for underrepresented. We're doing training and education programs. So we're trying to get better. So Charlene, to bring it back to you, how do you think Black Lives Matter has had an impact?
Oh my gosh, you guys are preaching my language, speaking my language. And, you know, Zora, I resonate so much. What you're saying resonates so much with me and my own personal story. You know, I don't have a proper British accent, but most people can't tell that I'm from a one light town in the deep South. So I get a lot of those same responses. And I think that experience about being able to stop something in its tracks goes back to what Shireen and what Lydia were talking about of saying, you know, it's a risk when you're the only one in the room, not just of your own identity group, but person of color or woman in general. There's a risk associated with that. I think that same type of risk or fear might also be carrying over into how, you know, into what stories are making it on screen. You know, it takes a lot of courage to move first. Specifically with the Black Lives Matter movement, I'm so glad this came up because we actually have some data around this as well. You know, Lydia talked about, you know, the very tumultuous 2020 and all of the lessons that we've learned. Some of these conversations have been ongoing for a lot of our households, and some folks had that conversation for the first time. If the slide can come up on the screen, we actually saw the week after the murder of George Floyd, we saw, you know, exponential increases to content like 13th, When They See Us, the Black Panthers documentary, Vanguard of a Revolution. So across a couple of different SVOD provider platforms for films that had been out or programs that had been out for years. I think 13th came out like maybe 5 years ago or so. You know, audiences seeking out this content to learn more about a community. You know, it's really about like media, not just as entertainment, but we talk about this in Nielsen's Inclusion Analytics report, but informing an identity, not just for that group, but how we see other people. And, you know, when we think about the amount of time that we spend with media in general, but TV specifically, there's a responsibility and an opportunity in telling a broader range of stories. And so Lydia brought up the phenomenal point about the change in our country's demographics. That is part of why we see this as a business imperative. oh, by the way, it's the right thing to do, but it is a literal business imperative. You are not speaking authentically to these communities if you don't have a rich understanding in nuance, from a place of respect. You're missing an opportunity. And, I think we get into when you're the only Black show or the only Asian show, there's so much pressure to represent everything and everyone. And we should also, again, have the space in the stories to address those different genres or topics and story arcs that audiences, quite frankly, want to see and are, sort of making moves to be able to see.
Yeah, good one. Good point. Okay, now that I will actually want to go back to Lydia again, because now that we're bringing up these delicate conversations, I want to ask you, Lydia, as a white woman that seems to be so proactive and is trying to change the dialogue and change the narrative. By the way, I'm Nigerian, so the fact that you're doing something yes, thank you. He's a legend to me. He's the best part of Nigeria, so I'm really happy about that. Do you get pushback from your white counterparts about stuff like this?
In what way specifically?
Everything. I mean, look at all the things you're trying to do, and you're trying to be, like you said, you're trying to do things that are much more. You're talking about trying to be a vocal supporter of women and minorities in the industry, and this impact network you formed. I think. I think what's interesting in my role as a filmmaker working in Hollywood, and I will say that I've worked in Hollywood, but I'm also an independent filmmaker. So, for instance, Mira Nair, who is one of the directors I've worked with for 30 years. I mean, we've kind of grown up together in the business, and we've kind of seen it all, and we have worked inside and outside of the system. So. But I think the thing that's very interesting right now, and it's the thing that we can talk about now, which we haven't been able to talk about for so long, is perspective and storytelling. And while we're on Nigeria, I think Chimamanda has that famous TED Talk speech that she gives about the danger of the single story, and it's an amazing TED Talk if you haven't seen it. But there is not one single story. She tells it in such a beautiful way. But her point is that you can take one dramatic story, and depending on who's telling it, if you have 5 people telling it, you're going to get 5 different stories. And so I think, for me, like when we made Queen of Katwe, which we did for Disney, and we were filming in Uganda, and it's a Ugandan story about a young girl who's is living in a slum but discovers she has a gift of chess. It was really clear to me, and I think the way it got to Disney was through an ESPN article, and there was a Ugandan executive at Disney who was a big champion of the project. And I realized when we were getting involved that the studio kind of saw it as a winning story, and that it was really about the coach and the girl. And I think Mira and I were very much interested in the story of the girl and her family. And her mother, was played by Lupita Nyong'o. The coach was played by David Oyelowo. These are both, great stars. And it just becomes very interesting when you have those kind of conversations with the studio. Yeah. Anyone else want to add anything to that? Shireen, do you have anything you want to add to this dialogue?
I would say that what Lydia was talking about in terms of execs are key. And I mean, I think that's, I can speak to it more on the TV side, because there just aren't enough execs from underrepresented groups. I mean, at the higher level, at the decision-making level, the pipeline is getting some of them in, but we need to be able to keep them. We need to be able to grow them. We need to get them up to the upper level, because when it comes to storytelling, the notes that we get from executives shape the story. And if we're getting notes that are from a particular lens, then it shapes the story towards that lens. And
but we can push back. Mm-hmm. We can push back. We pushed back with Disney. And we, you know, and I think I think Shireen, we all work at sort of different levels of the hierarchy and who we are working with. But I think that it's okay to bring these ideas up now without being overly worried. I mean, we didn't want to shoot the winning story of Queen and Katway. The thing about Fiona Matesi's book that made me want to do that movie was the line in the book where she is like gone all the way to the World Olympiad and she loses, you know, and Disney's like, oh my God, what are we going to do? You can't have a movie where she loses, you know, at the end.
That's
the
why.
line in the book, the line in the book that made me want to do the movie was, it's not, you know, Fiona says, I realized that it's not all about winning or losing. It's about the honor of playing the game. It's about the honor of being at the table. And that was so female and so beautiful. And I was like, oh, we've got to make this movie because of that. You know, it's not about win, lose, good, bad. It's like life is so much more complicated than that. And the nuance in that story is that she really had a decision of following her gift or saving her family. Should she save herself or save her family? That was really the dilemma. And that's really the beauty of the story, is how she navigates that journey. And it has
Lydia, let's have a difficult conversation about this, because as a white woman, let's be honest, do you think as a white woman it's easier for you to have these conversations about the creative discussions or ideas with executives? And how do you think we can champion for more BIPOC women?
Well, I think that, I mean, look, as a white woman, I'm aware that I have a certain privilege that other people who may not have, but I do think that it's changing, because I think there's more receptivity on the studio side for what people don't know or what they haven't been open to before. And the whole idea of diversity is not ticking boxes. It's about bringing in executives and people who work on the teams who represent the point of view that you don't have. Yeah. And that's what makes you a better company. That's what makes you, you know, a better storyteller, a better entity that's going to reach a bigger, wider audience. Because, and I teach a course at NYU in the Graduate Film School about audience, because they don't teach that in film school. And it's so important, because when you look at your script, look at the landscape of the world that you've created. Who's in it? Who's in it? And who's a stereotype? And why are they a stereotype? Does that character have agency, or are they just two-dimensional? And what are you trying to say about the world when you paint the world that way? And again, it's kind of what Charlene said. If you don't do that, if you don't self-critique yourself and break it apart and really think about it, because you can't do it normally, you have to do it like an exercise. If you don't do it, you're leaving a lot of money on the table.
Yeah. Shireen, just to wrap this up before we go into more actionable goals and actionable items and stuff. How do you think creators can use the TTI, i.e. a fact sheets, to create these multiple stories for execs to want to produce?
Part of it is the purpose of the fact sheets, like I said, was to start the conversation. And to what Lydia was saying, is that it's to show people the things that they don't know, and to start also having people live in that discomfort of, I don't know something, I need to ask for help. And the fact sheets kind of lay out what are the tropes that Hollywood has been perpetuating. I'll be honest, I've been in many writers' rooms where people just aren't even aware that these tropes exist. People are just blind to the fact that Latinx community, Black community are constantly being portrayed as criminals and drug dealers or something to that effect. Muslims are being always portrayed as terrorists or convenience store owners or something like that. And the fact sheets kind of delineate, these are the stories that are being overused. Start looking at the stories, the new stories that you can tell. And if you're not from that community, then reach out to people in the community, reach out to organizations that deal with those communities and ask for help. Don't just make assumptions.
Yeah. Well said. It's so true. I completely agree. I have to say, all of this has been so powerful, leading into the action, changing people's perceptions, and changing the way we see themselves, how they see themselves. And as you know, this is a conference that's dedicated to going beyond conversation and providing actionable advice to the audience about how to create a more inclusive world. I'd like to invite you all to have a dialogue with each other around this idea of action and share your best insights and actionable advice. So, with that being said, how do you think, some takeaways, some non-obvious takeaways from this? How do you think an audience can vote with their dollars and support via streaming services? Is there a way we can do that, do you think?
Well, I will jump in there and say that, audiences are already voting with their dollar and voting with their time. They're seeking out this content. One of the things that I love about the Inclusion Analytics Report is, one, how intersectional it is. So we do get into the East Asian, South Asian, Afro-Latinx representation versus Hispanics overall. We also dove into, San Francisco as a spotlight on Asian community and how they are seeking out alternative content, from broadcast networks to streaming and everything else, to find content in language, in culture, specifically. One other key takeaway is exactly how we started the call, and thinking back to our Native American talent that's out there. We have to be cognizant of the recurring tropes for certain communities, and then the folks who are, for that visibility, and then the folks who are invisible, on our screens, at all. So, there's so much opportunity there to tell stories, not just of a heritage and a history, but contemporary stories. And that's not being seen at all. If you go back to our rainbow chart, so there, when I think about, taking it back to informing identity, and Shireen's comments about how the executive's commentary can shape a story, what you're telling your audience is who has permission to find love, who breaks the law, who can be trusted with breaking news. And when you start to frame things in that way, like, this is the power of this story and the power of bringing in representation, not just the emotional impact for a community when we see ourselves on screen, but also for the demand in seeing, new voices and new, new stories. So I always say, just chase after and explore with nuance and with care those opportunities to tell more stories.
Absolutely. Anyone else have anything to add on to piggyback on that?
I would say, from the audience perspective, in addition to voting with your dollars, which I think is incredibly important, one thing that we've noticed just from the network and the studio perspective is be vocal on social media. If there's things that you don't like, be vocal. If there are things that you're excited about, the things that are so, that just being seen. For example, there was something that I put into a script that was just mentioning doubles from Trinidad and solo pop. The Trinidadian community exploded, and we're so just grateful just to have a representation of their culture, of their society in a TV episode. It goes back to just it being seen. Be vocal. Let them know that you want this. Let them know that it means something to you to be seen.
Yeah. Lydia?
I would say for people to really devise very conscious, specific strategies to break through your own bias, but the bias of the culture, whatever business culture you're working in. And I've been very impressed, by things like the Rooney Rule. You all know the Rooney Rule. Mm-hmm. It's if anybody in the audience doesn't know, it's this rule that the NFL developed that went to try to promote diversity in the head coaches of the football league. And they said you don't have to hire diverse necessarily, but they have to be on the list. You have to diversify your list of who you're interviewing for these positions. And the data shows, I think, Charlene, I don't know if you know more about it, I think the data shows that just by virtue of diversifying your list, the hiring diversified, because what they were proving was that you were meeting people that you wouldn't have otherwise met had you not had this kind of self-imposed structure to make you work a little harder to meet people that you didn't know. You have to reach out, network beyond your immediate networks, and then you expand your knowledge base. And that's such a beautiful thing. And I've heard that rule applied to hiring professors in college, to many different avenues of businesses. You have to do the work. Like, let's just say, this is the list of people you're going to interview. Look at the demographics of the list. What do you want that demographic to look like in order to feel responsible about the way you've thrown that net out to make your choice? And I think things like that are really important. I think you hear about finding it's big billionaire financial people. They don't rely on their instincts to make decisions. They have all these different mechanisms of decision. They call them decision trees, things that they check so that their bias isn't entering in necessarily, because bias is not what's going to get you there. It's the openness and the being connected and really using all of the resources of the world around you to make the right decision.
Exactly. Oh my God. Yeah, you said it. You said it. So let me ask you this: What do you think? What are the resources people can use to educate themselves about projects that are being released, or can use a boost? What do you think? What's the non-obvious, actionable way?
Well, from a data perspective, I do want to share that, especially for the work that everyone on the call is doing, Nielsen does have research released at no cost to you on our website, from training on audience and how we measure to this inclusion analytics data. So feel free to visit nielsen.com at /inclusion analytics for access to more of that data.
Fantastic. Anyone else?
On the TIE website, rightinclusion.org, you can find all of the fact sheets. We'll be rolling out several more over the next several months. Thank you for putting that.
Yeah, it's right there. Any last minute?
I'd like to actually say something about what Charlene was saying, is that a lot of the inclusion committees at the WGA, for example, they talk about the Nielsen data a lot, and there's been a lot of encouragement for people to put the Nielsen data in their pitches to studios and to networks to show that it impacts the bottom line, to try and get content, underrepresented community content out there, to say it'll be good, it'll bring you money. So you should do it now.
I think that's important too. And when we did the BizFactor toolkit, that was one of the really great benefits, was that people were able to sort of cherry pick data and incorporate it into their pitch packages, because you are bringing something forward that they should be thinking about if they're not. And the minute they see it, it makes sense. And marketing is what people think about when they're taking pitches. They're automatically hearing your story, thinking, how can I sell this? How can I sell this? That's what's going on.
We love to see it.
Yeah.
Thank you, Charlene.
More coming soon.
Oh, great. Thank you. Been amazing. Honestly, this has been so, I could chat with you ladies so much more, because there's so much, let's be honest, there's so much more that needs to be covered about this. And it's just, it's these are conversations that are obviously happening, and they need to keep happening. So thank you, ladies. Anyone want to have any last minute things they just have to share with us immediately before we wrap up? Well, thank you. Thank you all very much.
Yeah.
Thank you
for joining us. It's been great. You've been watching Casting Calls, how to create accurate representations for underrepresented communities. And this has been part of the Non-Obvious Beyond Diversity Summit. Thank you to SRC Partners for bringing us all together for this fascinating discussion. Like I said, we could keep talking and talking, but we've got to say goodbye until the next time. Ladies, again, it's been an honor speaking with you and moderating with you. And I want to thank you, the audience, for watching us. Check out all the other topics we're covering, because we've brought together some amazing voices of different genres, genders, and geographies. And then finally, for fascinating conversations, why don't you visit www.nonobviousdiversity.com Thanks for joining us. I'm Zora DeHorter, and remember to always stay non-obvious.